Hi, if you like the video, please remember to subscribe. Hi, I'm Rob from robandphoto.com, and in today's little video I'm going to be looking at autofocus modes, mainly for Canon, because I'm going to be demonstrating them on a Canon camera, but it applies just as much to any other make of camera as well. Because the thing about shooting with your phone camera or a compact is that the camera makes all the decisions for you, doesn't it? And at some point, though, you decide, you've had enough of shooting with a compact or your phone camera because you want more control, you want better image quality, and you want often a choice of different lenses, and that's where you kind of step up and you get something like a DSLR, like this old Canon 350D. I'm just going to use for this video my old camera. But when you get your DSLR, there are so many settings to play with. It can be really intimidating. There's controls to adjust almost everything. There's so much to learn. And often we don't take full advantage of what our cameras can do. We kind of get comfortable with the modes that we're used to shooting in, say, as an aperture priority mode, shutter priority, automatic program mode, or maybe manual. When maybe there's also some other features that we could explore and take advantage of to help us to take better photos. And one of the areas that modern DSLRs, or modern cameras in general, really excel at is autofocus. And this is one of the big differences. When you step up to a DSLR, the speed and the snappiness of the autofocus is really good. Even on entry-level models, they focus so much faster than your camera phone or a compact camera, and that really is amazing. And we know that all we've got to do to get a sharp image, you just you look through your viewfinder, don't you? You half press the shutter, the lens goes bzzz, it locks focus, normally beeps at you, and then you press the shutter button all the way down. And it takes the photo, as long as you've got your subject behind one of the autofocus points, those little boxes. However, the problem is that when you do that, when you look through the shutter, get your subject behind one of the autofocus points that you've chosen, press it halfway down and it beeps. The problem is that your subject has to be still. So it's got to be a landscape or a cityscape or, a flower or a person, but they can't be moving, because if they move, or you move after you've got that beep, then it will be out of focus. So imagine you're in a situation where your subject's moving toward you, like it's a person running or a sports car or an animal. Then we're just not going to get the shot. We could use pre-focusing, but maybe if it's a subject we're not sure where it's going to move to, maybe it's moving at a diagonal across to us, or maybe on a meandering curve. We've got we're a little bit stuck. Now, one of the things you could do is you can, if the subject's moving across, obviously you can pan, because if the subject stays in the same distance from us, it will roughly stay in the same focal plane, so we can still use our one-shot focus. But if it's moving towards or away from us, what do we do? I mean, we could move to manual focus, couldn't we? We could slick the little switch back to manual focus, and then we could, turn the focus ring that way, and you would call it pulling focus, is what they do in films and stuff like that. But let's leave pulling focus to the videographers out there, especially when our cameras can actually track and focus on moving subjects for us anyway. So what I'd like to do in this video is look at the different modes that your camera will be able to do, explain them a little bit, and how they can help you take better, sharper photos of moving subjects. So the first autofocus mode you've got in your camera, which is probably the one you're using right now, is one shot. If you go into the autofocus menu, it will probably say one shot, AI focus, and AI servo. And one shot's quite simply the one I described at the beginning. So you press the shutter button halfway down, you get a beep, and you press the button all the way down, and you can take the photo. Fantastic. Nice and easy, nice and simple. And this will work for 90% of the shots that you're going to take of static subjects, or where you're static too. It's also great for focus and recompose, so if you've got to focus on something and then move, it works very, very well, because once you've got that initial focus lock, the camera will not change focus. And again, as I explained, if the subject is moving horizontally, or actually it can be vertically across, but it's staying roughly the same distance away from you, then that's fine as well. You can just pan and capture it. But if your subject's moving towards you or away from you, that's when you might have trouble, and that's when you have to use the next autofocus function, which is AI Servo. Now, with AI Servo, this is where things start getting interesting. And now you may wonder, when you're looking at the autofocus function on the back of your camera, why I've skipped AI Focus. I'll come back to AI Focus in a little bit. But what happens in AI Servo mode, when you press your shutter button halfway, in fact, let's select it now. When you press it halfway down, the camera starts to autofocus, but it doesn't stop. It carries on trying to autofocus. So if your subject moves away from you, as long as you've got it behind the autofocus point you've chosen, if your subject starts moving away, it will focus on them still. You can probably hear this on the mic if I put it close. See? There we go. If I move the camera around, you can hear it hunting backwards and forwards, and that's basically what it's doing. It's hunting, it's following the subject. So if I focus on, say, that lamp there, well, you can't see it, but there's a lamp there. If the camera moves back, actually, the camera will carry on focusing. But if the lamp was moving, it would do the same thing. So how cool is that? So you've got a moving subject that's going to be zooming around. So imagine like an ice skater zooming around, or you're at a football match, and players are running around, and you're trying to follow a player as they move along, and they're coming towards you and are coming away from it. All you need to do is keep that button halfway pressed, and as long as you keep that player behind the autofocus point, the camera's constantly going to be refocusing to make sure you get a sharp shot. And it really is amazing. Now, the problem is that they've got to be behind that autofocus point. And if the camera moves or the subject moves, then often the camera will then jump and focus on something in the distance, say the background, or maybe even something in the foreground. So if you really want to push the envelope as far as what your camera can do, go to your AF menu, where you select the AF points, which on Canons is normally up in the top right hand corner. But basically you press it and they all come up, and then you go to the selection where they're all lit up. And this is normally when you're aperture priority or shutter priority or manual mode. And what this is auto AF point selection. And that means the camera will choose the autofocus point to use, which generally is the closest thing to you. But then what will happen, and this is really, really clever, as your subject moves in front of you, if it moves off the first autofocus point that you've focused on, the camera will then track it around the autofocus point. Now, depending on your camera and how many autofocus points you've got will kind of dictate to how good this is. And high-end cameras have 100 autofocus points, and so they'll track like a bird flying around or an airplane flying around, and they'll keep tracking it. Where your cheaper cameras that don't have as many autofocus points can lose focus, but it really is quite amazing. Again, it can be a bit hit and miss because sometimes, again, the camera can jump to the background or jump to the foreground. But what you should really do to explore the capabilities of your camera, go into AI Servo, go into Auto AF Point Selection, and just have a practice on, say, seagulls flying past or cars going along, and just see how the camera can track a subject as it moves across the viewfinder. And what you'll probably find is you'll find for certain things it works very well, but maybe for other ones you go back to a single point of autofocus that you'll select, probably the middle one, and then you'll just follow your subject around with your button halfway down, and then the camera will track it through. And really it's just all about practice with that. Now, the third autofocus mode, which funny enough is the second one normally on your camera menu, is AI Focus. And AI Focus is really just a combination of one-shot autofocus and AI Servo. Because what happens with AI Focus is that when you press the button halfway down and get a focus lock, you get a beep. But then what happens is if your subject moves or your camera moves, you might be able to hear that. What happens then is it goes into AI Servo mode. So the camera starts to refocus and beep, and then refocus and beep, and refocus and beep. So it's constantly trying to get focus again. And then it gets focus and it locks and it stays. And then if your subject moves or you move, it redoes it again. So that can be a really useful and a really powerful tool if you're trying to take photographs of moving subjects. So there we go. That's my quick guide to Canon's and lots of other cameras' autofocus different modes. You've got one shot, which is great for still subjects, or things that are moving sort of past you in the same plane. You've got AI Servo, which is where your camera will constantly try and refocus and it can track subjects as they're moving around. And then you've got AI Focus, where the camera will start off by locking on a subject, and if they move, it'll then refocus and lock again. And just get to know all these different modes, practice with them, and remember, when you finish doing what you're doing, go back to single AF, go back to one shot AF. Otherwise, you'll get your camera out of the next session, and you may well find it's in a mode that you're trying to focus and recompose, and your camera's constantly refocusing. And that's why it's really helpful to use the wife checklist before you start when you go out. So remember, W is for white balance, check your white balance. I is for ISO, check your ISOs at the setting you want. F is for focus, so make sure your autofocus is on and you're in the autofocus mode that you want, whether it be one shot, AI Focus, or AI Servo. Hope the video has been helpful. Remember, if you like it, please subscribe. Put comments down below. You can email me, scalespeeder@gmail.com, and hopefully I'll see you again soon.